Hello, my name's Mark and welcome to Cryptic Camp. This video is going to be about something I came across. I didn't discover the skull, but I did come across this information and I've never heard this mentioned anywhere else before. It's called the Ellis County skull, and it's a really strange looking skull that was discovered in Ellis County, Oklahoma. One day I was browsing through newspaper archives, as I like to do, finding content, and I came across this. I didn't really realize the significance at the time. I just posted it and I came back to it later to look up further information. So the first time I found it was in the Evening Star, Washington, D.C., November 24th, 1941. The article says, human skull dug up in U.S. closely resembles ape-man. And in the image it shows on the far left an image of a modern human skull. In the middle is the image of the Ellis County skull. And on the far right is the Java Man skull. And here's what's interesting. On the far right, the skull is dated back to 500,000 years. And if you look at the skull in the middle, the Ellis County skull, it kind of looks like a mixture of a modern human and Java Man. In the article it says, skull puzzle scientists at left for comparative purposes is a normal modern human skull. In the center is the skull found in Ellis County, Oklahoma, which may be either a freak or may be so old as to antedate any human so far found in America. At the right is a 500,000-year-old skull of an early ape-man from Java. Note, the middle skull resembles the modern skull in some respects and the ancient skull in others, and that's pretty much what I thought also. So later when I got time, I came back and I looked up the story and I wasn't able to find any information. And then one night I was laying in bed watching Expedition Files. Was it Josh Gates? And they were talking about Stonehenge, and it was kind of bugging me. I started thinking about the skull again, because these elongated skulls I have found in articles not only all over the country, but they're all over the world. And it's something I've been digging into really hard lately because the official story just doesn't make sense to me. It's such a strange thing to do. Why would anyone come up with the idea to elongate their skull in the first place? But for it to be found literally all over the entire world, I'm talking like tiny little islands, mainland, you name it, like there's elongated skulls everywhere. Now, some of them are from head binding and others are not. Like the Paracas skulls, a good percentage of those, they look like 4 human skulls stacked on top of each other. And even the ones from head binding are interesting to me because where did they come up with that idea? It's not like everyone was connected. We're told that people really weren't crossing the oceans till the 1400s. So how did all these people come up with the same idea? And on top of that, it usually represents the same thing. It's usually the ruling class had the elongated skulls. It represented beauty, knowledge, and that you were some type of person in a position of power in your community. But anyways, that's why I've been digging really hard. And so whenever I find one of these anomalous skulls, it kind of goes into my list of strange skulls here. And I've actually collected a good amount of strange skulls found in the United States. But one thing that's starting to become more clear is there seems to be a hot spot along the Missouri River, and I've found a lot of different strange skulls in that area, especially also in the Ohio River, but those are the elongated skulls. Anyways, that night while I was watching Josh Gates' show, I did another search. This time I tried using AI I told it to look through archives to see if it could find me any information about this skull, because it had a name and everything, the Ellis County skull. I figured there should be some sort of information, and then I was able to hit pay dirt and I found this, a Preliminary Report on the Ellis County Skull by T.C. Carter, Northwestern State College. It says that the Ellis County Skull was found by Richard Henderson and Earl Gurley in, 1937? Lying on Permian clay in sand and gravel about 25 feet beneath the surface. The location was on the south bank of Commission Creek near Bishop in Ellis County, Oklahoma, where an excavation had been made recently in building a road. Before I go on reading the rest of the report, I wanted to show something. So I did a search. Permian clay in Oklahoma. I wanted to get an idea of roughly how old the ground was, the ground level that this skeleton was found in. And this is what I found. Permian clay in Oklahoma would generally date to somewhere between 290 million and 250 million years old, with many units in the state clustering roughly around 270 to 250 million years old. So, just because it was found at that level does not mean it is that old. But, when you look at the image, it doesn't look like a modern human skull. And so, this kind of makes you wonder. It was found in a level that is almost 300 million years old of ground. But going back to the report, it says that the skull was almost complete when found, only a little restoration being necessary in order to make it complete. Sufficient amounts of most of the bones were present to make the correct restoration quite positive. The skull differs from the average skull in a modern man in having an exceptionally low forehead, massive supraorbital ridges. The zygomatic arches are heavy, but not outside of the range for modern men. A small cranial capacity. That's something I see a lot in these reports. They always make sure to mention that these ancient people had small brains, and that might be so, but I don't know. That might just be their interpretation from the time, because back then they pretty much assumed everyone was a caveman. But obviously not, because a lot of these strange skulls are usually found in or around megalithic sites or mounds, stonework structures, things like that. But it says number 5, a sagittal crest and heavy occipital bone. The lower skull, however, comes well within the range for that of a modern man, having a well-developed chin, a small maxilla and dental arcade, small teeth, small molar bones. The rami of the mandible is narrow and elongated process, and well-developed spines on the inner surface of the chin, the entire mandible being indistinguishable from modern types. The skull was sent to the American Museum of Natural History at the request of Dr. Howard W. Blakesley, the science editor of the Associated Press, where it was examined carefully by Dr. H.I. Shapiro and Professor Wiedenreich, distinguished authorities on fossil man. Dr. Shapiro's conclusions were as follows. The skull is, however, exceptional in the extremely flat brow and in the lowness of the cranial vault. Indeed, the outline tracing that of the skull when superimposed on that of Peking men indicates that the Ellis County skull is a little, if any, higher than the Chinese fossil in absolute height. So I think what it's saying there is basically it's about the same height as Peking men. Moreover, the brow ridges are exceptionally heavy, but not outside of the range of recent men. The combinations, therefore, of browlessness, low vault, and heavy structure in the zygomatic arches and the occipital bone do tend to endow the skull with a superficially primitive appearance, which in my opinion is misleading. But as soon as the jaw and face are examined, it becomes plain that this pseudo-primitive appearance is confined to the vault formation. Frankly, I cannot offer any demonstrable hypothesis to explain the peculiar character of the skull. It may represent a local variant, of an extreme order, or it may be simply morphologically degenerative type. You are quite right that had the skull cap alone been found, it would have suggested a greater morphological antiquity. Of course, my conclusion that this skull is not phylogenetically primitive does not preclude its relative antiquity in America. Geologically, the evidence now admits of approximately 25,000 years or over of human occupation in the New World. Figure 1 shows side view of the Ellis County skull, and Figure 2 is the front view of it. Figure 3 shows the road excavation where the skull was found. Note the Permian clay in the foreground. Then I wanted to tell you about another strange looking skull that I found that also happens to be in Oklahoma. This was an article I found. It says the first ethnological field work conducted by the University of Oklahoma was led by Professor Joseph Thoburn, curator of the University Museum, assisted by Dr. Irving Perrine of the Department of Geology. Their work focused on a series of ancient mounds located roughly 3 miles north of Spiro, Oklahoma in LaFleur County, near the Kansas City Southern Railroad line. These excavations uncovered remarkable evidence of prehistoric mound-building cultures that once thrived in the region, representing one of Oklahoma's earliest documented university-led archaeological investigations. And if you look at it, the head does seem kind of tall. It doesn't look like the Paracas skulls, but it does seem kind of strange. There was a lot of artifacts found with this. Like, for instance, you can see the wolf's head bull. That's a really common thing. Or these death mask bulls are really common in mound builder burials. Here's, it just mentions the skull a little bit. It says the skull of prehistoric man is of peculiar receding shape, which is said to be characteristic of the skulls of primitive people. The man was over 6 feet tall, which, side note, that's really tall for back then. Humans, I want to say, like, what the average European when they first got to America was around 5 feet or 5 feet 5, something like that. So 6 feet tall is pretty tall for back then. Humans are the tallest they've ever been in history. Even now, 6 foot is good size. But according to Professor Thoburn, every tooth was sound, which speaks volumes for the health of this race. The skull was smooth and 6 plates thinned. A finger bone, oddly enough, had been severed on the left hand, probably after a period of the body and from pressure of the overlying earth. The teeth had apparently been set by adult, but age was proved by the grinding surface of the teeth. Now, that was just another one that's interesting, but it's not like a smoking gun. Here was another story from Oklahoma that one of my viewers sent me. Now, I cannot tell from the image if the head just got smashed from, you know, the ground and dirt laying on its skull, or if it was from head binding or elongated, but it does kind of look almost like a elongated skull. Basically, what the viewer told me was that in the small town called Bradley, Oklahoma, construction workers building a road discovered this skeleton, and someone this person knows happened to be at the site and snap a couple of images of it. So when the person who sent me this information tried to look up more about the story, there wasn't anything they could find. Basically, they said that they found this site just north of the new one. They looked up and found the property owners. Basically, it says there was other excavations in Bradley, Oklahoma that uncovered a significant prehistoric Native American settlement known as the Jewett Jewett site, discovered on the Jewett family property in 1979. So I don't think that's the same find as this, but I just thought that was interesting. And also in Oklahoma. Here's another interesting story that I found from Oklahoma. The Butler Weekly Times, Butler, Missouri, July 22nd, 1909. In the bottom right corner, there is one article or one story called Unearths Bones of a Giant in Gotebo, Gotebo, Oklahoma, July. Bones of an Indian believed to have been in the ground more than 100 years were found here by M.P. Hooker. While hunting in the woods, a bone was seen projecting from the creek bank where it had been washed out by the rains. After a little digging, Mr. Hooker uncovered the full skeleton of what evidently was a giant Indian. That's an interesting but very common story back in the day. Now, it doesn't give precise measurements, which I wish it did, so I give it a little less credibility for that reason, but it is not unheard of. Now, moving one state north to Kansas, if I remember correctly. In Kansas, we got a story here that's pretty interesting, and it was a skull found that they now call the Lansing Skull. It's strange because I never once heard this story growing up. I didn't hear it in school. I only heard about it from digging through newspaper archives, but this one came from it was in a bunch of papers, but here's one. Washington, D.C., October 18th, 1902. Prehistoric American. Great interest attaches to the uncovering of a buried skull near Lansing, Kansas. And I'll try to skim through this for you, but basically it says, the prehistoric skull is now in possession of Mr. Long. After a thorough investigation, Mr. Long is satisfied that the skull is that of a prehistoric man, who in all probability lived during the glacial period, 35,000 years ago, and this opinion is fully shared by Professor S.W. Williston of the Kansas University. On March 23rd of this year, workmen found the skull while digging a tunnel deep into the side of a hill on a farm near Lansing, Kansas. Mr. Long chanced to hear the finding of the skull and went to Lansing. If the opinion of Curator Long and Professor Wilson is correct, as they feel assured it is, the Lansing skull for the first time offers tangible proof of the existence of prehistoric men in North America. In Europe, several prehistoric skulls have been found, but this is the first to be found in America. The Lansing skull was found deep under well-defined strata of earth and rock and was embedded in what is called river loess. This prehistoric man was probably a contemporary of the mastodon and giant sloth. Now, here's the interesting part to me. The photograph does not give an adequate idea of how peculiar of the perceptive faculties. The forehead slopes back immediately from the eyes, and there is practically no forehead. Over the eyes, however, are well-developed ridges, which are taken to denote that the perceptive faculties were considerable. The back of the skull, as seen in the illustration, is almost abnormally developed, and there the skull is very thick. Pieces of stone are attached to it and embedded in the skull, and those pieces of stone are identified with those attached to the bones of mastodons. The cracks seen in the skull were caused by workmen who found it, for they attached no importance to the find and allowed several heavy boxes to fall upon it, breaking it into half a dozen pieces. Curator Long has copyrighted the photographs. Basically, going back here to the peculiar skull, sorry, I'm having trouble saying that word, it says something that's super interesting. There was practically no forehead. The head slopes back immediately from the eyes, and there's well-developed ridges. So that kind of describes the Ellis County's skull, which has that giant bump above the eyes and the forehead. So it almost kind of looks like it has a unibrow. It's kind of a similar description, just one state north of Oklahoma. Okay, now moving one state north again. Here's another story I found. This one was in the New York Tribune, November 4th, 1906. And this is an interesting one from Nebraska. The headline is, Mr. Gilder's newly found Nebraska skull at right compared with a normal skull at left. Note the difference in distance between the nose and the top of the cranium. A prehistoric skull belonged to the lowest type of man known on this continent. Omaha, November 3rd, a skull, or at least part of the skull, of the lowest type of prehistoric man that the North American continent has yet revealed. Just been discovered several miles north of Omaha, buried in a Indian mound. Antedating, it is estimated by thousands of years, the famous Lansing skull of Kansas, which I just covered and talked about. Here it says, Nebraska skull has interested scientific men across the country. There are now several other bones of this. Professor Henry Fairfield Osborne of Columbia University, New York, says, it is without doubt the skull of the lowest order of primitive man ever found on this continent. He adds that the skull shows an extremely small brain with almost no possibilities of a power of thought. Dr. Barber, professor of operative dentistry in Creighton University, says the jaw indicates tremendous crushing power. These teeth have been worn down through the process of grinding roots, nuts, and raw meat. The lower jaw protruded beyond the upper, and there is an abnormal development of both of them. As compared with a normal skull, the Gilder Nebraska skull shows receding chin and forehead, abnormally large cheekbones, and a brain pan ridiculously small. The dome of the head is only 1 inch above the top of the eye sockets. But the man was a giant. Nevertheless, from other bones found in the same mound, the man who owned the skull originally must have been nearly 7 feet tall. Despite his little head, with the strength of 2 ordinary men of today, in opening of the mound in which the bones were found, Mr. Gilder first found 3 skulls and other bones of an intermediate race of men, far above the Nebraska man in thinking powers. Several feet below the first burial, the bones of 3 other beings were found. These 3 were of same class, showing that Gilder's Nebraska skull is not a freak, but is really a type of the people who lived in that day. Mr. Gilder is a brother of Richard Watson Gilder, editor of The Century, and of Joseph B. Gilder, editor of Putnam's Magazine. Well, that's pretty interesting. This article basically just said that other bones were found in this burial mound, and that this wasn't an anomaly, that they found others that looked similar to this skull. And then it mentions that he's a relative of people who work for the editor of Putnam's Magazine, which I need to look that up. Frederick Ward Putnam, I've covered some of his excavations in my videos before. He worked on Serpent Mound. I think he spent 2 months excavating around Serpent Mound, and he went on record to say that he found multiple skeleton types, long skulls and short round skulls, and that he believes that these 2 people basically the long skulls came from the north and the short round skulls came from the south, and then they met in the modern day area of Tennessee and Ohio, and that's why there's so many elaborate pyramids and burial mounds, effigy mounds, henges, you name it, in that area. But going back to the Gilder skull, the most important thing is, the weird shaped head, the sloping head, or it instantly goes back. But the man was a giant. They said he was 7 foot tall, which, like I said earlier, was extremely tall back then, because humans are as tall as they've ever been now, and 7 foot is really tall even for our time now. So that's another report of a strange skull that happened to be very tall. Okay, so here's just another article about the previous skull I talked about from Nebraska. Lowest men. They call this one Lowest Men number 8, which is just another name for the Gilder skull. I'm assuming, because this one shows a different image, but it mentions the same location and the same person who found it. So I don't know why this one shows a different image, but this one says Nebraska lowest man, 20,000 years old. Mr. Gilder, which is the name from the last story, Gilder skull, has made a collection of archaeological and anthropological specimens for years. He has dug hundreds of old skulls from the depths of Nebraska soil and unearthed many of the secrets of the Nebraska mound builders. Probably thrived here hundreds, maybe thousands of years ago, before the Native Americans that we're familiar with. One antedates the other two, but of these three skulls, antedates the other two not by hundreds of years but by thousands, in the opinion of some of the leading geologists who have placed it in history of the world by the lowest clay in which it was found on the farm of Emmanuel Long, 3 miles north of Florence. A few years ago, a dozen skulls were taken from the same excavation by Mr. Gilder at that time. The one he now presents to the University of Nebraska School of Medicine has been named Nebraska lowest man number 8. This is because it was the 8th skull removed from this excavation. So basically, if I'm getting this right, that other skull was another one he found. This is a different one. Dr. George E. Condra of the Department of Geography and Geology of the University of Nebraska, and E. H. Barber, head of Department of Geology of the University of Nebraska, both examined the lowest clay in the pit where the skulls were found and have estimated that the clay was deposited there about 20,000 years ago. This is taken to mean that the man upon whose shoulders this fierce skull once rested lived 20,000 years ago. The skull was thick, Nebraska lowest man number 8 being one who was fit to survive in the hardy times. The superficial ridges over each eye that would ward off a hawk from a ball bat swung by some of the league players of the present day. Some of these articles are really hard to read. The ink is all smudged and, the image is blurry, but I'm going to try my best to read this. He had almost no forehead at all. Superficial ridges. The ridges over each eye are pronounced as a flange on a car wheel, while the back of this ridge, his skull slopes back to the rear of his head. This man was expected to take knocks. The bone ridge over each eye would protect the eyes from blows, blah blah blah. There is not much room for brains on the skull. Likewise, there was not much need for brains. It says it was found under a mound. These skulls were found in undisturbed clay about 7 feet beneath an old mound north of Florence. Scientists have come from France, Germany, and Russia to view the skulls for the anthropological interest that they hold. They have been pronounced the best specimens of ancient man, next to the famous Neanderthal skull, which was discovered in Germany some years ago, and which is looked upon as just a small step removed from the ape stage. Along with the skull, Mr. Gilder's gift to medical school goes his skull of the Nebraska mound builder, estimated to be about 2,000 years old. This was found in a mound just north of Coffin Springs in Sarpy County, Nebraska. 72 skulls Mr. Gilder took out of this mound. Wow. Took out 72 skulls from this mound in an excavation about 62 feet by 34 feet. Pottery, stone, implements, and shell beads were found also in this excavation. The skull has a much more pronounced forehead than the lowest man, and in fact there is almost no comparison. Although the mound builder has no forehead to compare favorably with the average American citizen today, also superficially or superorbital ridges over the eyes is no longer so pronounced. Basically, it's saying this other skull that they found that's only 2,000 years old looks a lot more like a modern human being, but this lowest man number 8, basically, long story short, it's anomalous looking, or it looks ancient, prehistoric. So that must have been another skull the same man found, Gilder. The last story was called Gilder's Skull. This is called Lowest Man number 8, but both were found by what sounds like the same man in the same area of Nebraska. Now, here's another story from Nebraska, though it wasn't about a skull that was found. It's a super interesting story. It's in the Herald and News, Newberry, South Carolina, January 31st, 1913. It says, ruins without limit. In numbers, those old ruins are almost without limit. According to Dr. Gilder, every hill between Sioux City and Kansas City is simply a vast house site, and in every one explored there are the same indications of a hasty fight and great tragedy. These ruins do not appear on the Iowa side of the Missouri River it's talking about, but are confined altogether to the Nebraska side. However, there are remains of an entirely different people and another civilization on the Iowa hills. That the two races lived in entirely different ages is shown by the fact that none of the implements common on one side of the river is found on the other side. In many respects, these ancient people were entirely foreign to any other whose remains have ever been found in America. This is shown by the implements left behind when they took their fight. Among these is a beautifully carved head with distinctly Egyptian features, including the rectangular ear guards worn by them, entirely foreign to anything ever found before on the American continent. Of it, James Mooney of the American Bureau of Ethnology said, it is the greatest archaeological find in America in a century, and nothing like it has ever been found. Harlan I. Smith, head of the Archaeological Survey of Canada, who saw the little head some time ago, announced that he was entirely unable to classify it, and that certainly it belonged to a culture of which archaeologists and anthropologists in America knew absolutely nothing. Some of the house sites which the Harvard expedition will examine are of immense size. One recently located by Dr. Gilder is 125 feet in diameter, and the floor is 9 feet below the surface of the surrounding ground. Because of the immense size of these houses, Dr. Gilder believes that the race which inhabited them was communistic in habit, or that each man was blessed with 100 wives. Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, I mean, basically it sounds like they were big houses, but the interesting part was that you could see the difference on the other side of the Missouri River, and different artifacts were found on one side versus the other, and I thought that was pretty interesting. It sounds like our guy Gilder is once again involved with this story. Now, going over to Iowa, here's another story I found about strange-looking skeletons and skulls from Iowa. This article was from the Milford Chronicle, Milford, Delaware, September 7th, 1888, though this story was printed in tons of newspaper articles across the entire country. This is just this particular paper. The people of Floyd County, Iowa have often speculated of the contents of a group of 40 curious-looking mounds on the farm of John Scrimmager, but none of them had curiosity enough to investigate until Professor Webster took the work in hand on his own account. Scrimmager Farm lies just north of the pretty village of Charles City and is one of the most beautiful sections, blah blah blah. On the eastern part of the farm is a long, low ridge running directly north and south, on top of which are the mounds, some 40 in number, about 3 feet in height and ranging from 15 to 25 feet in length. Thus far, Professor Webster has opened 14 of these mounds and found the skeletons of 30 people he thinks of different race from any of the prehistoric remains yet unearthed in this country. Just how long the ridge and mounds have been there, Mr. Scrimmager can't say. Neither can the oldest settler, and neither can the Potawatomi Indian traditions, which run back many centuries. Forgive me if I mispronounced that. Obviously, it was the local native tribe. It says, That both ridge and mounds were built by human hands is plain from which the mathematical regularity in which they are arranged, and the hardness of the soil composing them, which is packed firm, like a stone, while that of the virgin prairie in the neighborhood is soft and yielding. The skeletons found by Professor Webster are in various stages of preservation, some quite solid, others crumbling to dust, while in the mound there was nothing but a bed of ashes. All the dead had been buried in a doubled up position, the knees being crowded on the lower jaw, and the head of each are carefully laid towards the east, which is pretty interesting. I found that in countless articles about mound builders, they're usually facing a particular direction. Sometimes east, sometimes north, sometimes west, and a lot of times buried in the seated position. Or they're in these circular burials. There's literally a map someone made of all of these reports of circular burials. And usually how it goes is the tallest individual was placed in the center, and the smaller individuals are in a circle or semicircle around the tallest individual. You can find that in mound builder reports across the country. But going back to the story, it says that all of the dead have been buried in a doubled up position, facing east, etc., while the femur bones show that most of the skeletons are those of people about 5'7" tall, which ain't bad for that time. There are 4, the original owners of which, who must have been fully 7 feet tall. The skulls are those of a race of very inferior beings. The tops are abnormally thick, and the frontal bones slope abruptly back from the eyes, while the lower jaws protrude forward so that the underteeth come outside of the upper ones. In general, contoured, the skulls resemble those of prehistoric mound builders found in Ohio, Indiana, and Wisconsin. Most of the skeletons found by Professor Webster show marks of fire, as if the flesh had been burned from the bones before burial. Another strange finding was that the entire absence of anything like personal trinkets or implements of war of those of the chase, as are generally found in eastern mounds. The bones of animals showing that the friends of the deceased had celebrated their interment with funeral feasts are also missing. The only thing thus far unearthed in the Iowa mounds, aside from the skeletons, is a lot of broken pottery of crude design and make, including one nearly whose vase or urn of archaic workmanship, which Professor Webster now has. New York Sun. Okay, so the important parts in this, my takeaways. It says that most of the people were 5'7" tall, but 4 of them were fully 7 feet tall. The skulls, which their interpretation means that they were an inferior race. I guess they thought the skulls were more primitive, but my interpretation being that these strange skulls or tall people are usually placed in the center leads me to believe that they were probably the ruling class or the elite. Just like the Paracas skulls found down in Peru, these skulls are usually found around ancient structures, megalithic sites, or mounds, and so I don't believe that these were inferior beings or primitive people. It almost just sounds like they were a different type of people. But anyways, it says the tops, the heads, are abnormally thick, and the frontal bones slope abruptly back from the eyes, while the lower jaws protrude forward. So here again in Iowa, we have a similar description of a weird shaped head. It says that the people were 7 feet tall, so they were giants, and that is a common theme amongst these anomalous skull reports. Now moving over to Missouri, there's one story I wanted to tell you about. Now I got 1,000 of these stories, but this seemed to be kind of like a little hot spot over in this area. Most of these reports are in the Ohio Valley and over by, the other side of eastern Missouri, over by the Mississippi River and the Ohio River. But This one was on the other side of Missouri, not far from our original story, Oklahoma. This one comes back to Kansas City area, which is interesting to me. It seems like most of these stories are kind of along the Missouri River and the other rivers. The Missouri River, the Mississippi River, and the Ohio River seem to be kind of where all these mound builder cultures, civilizations set up camp. Here was a story I found in the Daily Free Press, Trenton, New Jersey, November 16th, 1876. The story says, "The Skeletons of Giants. In researches among the forests of western Missouri, Judge E.P. West has discovered a number of conical-shaped mounds, similar in construction to those found in Ohio and Kentucky. These mounds are found upon the high bluffs overlooking the Missouri River, the largest and more prominent being found in Tennessee, Mississippi, and Louisiana. Until about 3 weeks ago, it was not suspected that the mound builders had made this region their home in the prehistoric days, but now it is discovered that this strange and extinct race once occupied this land and have left an extensive graveyard in a number of high mounds upon the Clay County bluffs. As yet, only one of these mounds has been opened. Judge West discovered a skeleton about 2 weeks ago and made a report to other members of society. They accompanied him to the mound and not far from the surface excavated and took out the remains of 2 skeletons. The bones are very large, so large in fact, when compared with an ordinary skeleton of modern date, they appear to have formed part of a giant. The head bones, such as have not rotted away, are monstrous in size. The lower jaw of one skeleton is in a state of preservation and is double the size of the jaw of a civilized person. And by civilized person, they just mean a person of modern times. The teeth in this jawbone are large and appear to have been ground down and worn away by contact with roots and carnivorous foods. The jawbone indicates immense muscular strength. The thigh bone, when compared with that of an ordinary modern skeleton, looks like that of a horse. The length, the thickness, and muscular development are remarkable, but the most peculiar part about the skeleton is the frontal bone. It is very low and differs radically from any ever seen in this section before. It forms one thick ridge of bone about 1 inch wide, extending across the eyes. It is narrow but rather heavy ridge of bone which, instead of extending upward as it does now with today's civilization, it recedes back from the eyebrows, forming a flat head, and thus indicates a very low order of mankind. It is the opinion of the scientific gentlemen who are making these discoveries that the bones are the remains of a prehistoric race of men. They do not resemble the present existing race of Indians, nor are the mounds constructed upon any pattern or model known to have been in use by any race of men now in existence in America. The bodies are discovered in a sitting posture in the mound, which is interesting because that's something if you're following my Facebook page, I have found in countless articles. And another interesting thing is I've also noticed in Peru, a lot of the mummies found down there are buried in the seated position. It says here, and among the bones are found stone weapons such as flint knives, flint scrapers, and all of them in different shape, to the arrowheads, war hatchets, and other stone tools, weapons known to have been in use by the Aboriginal Indians of this land when discovered by the whites. The gentlemen who have these curious bones in charge have deposited them with Dr. Foe on Main Street. It is their intention to make further and closer researches in the mounds of the bluffs opposite of the city. They will make a report of their labors at the next meeting of the Academy of Science, by which time they expect to be able to make some definite report as to their opinions. It is pretty definitely settled, however, that the skeletons are those of a race of men not now in existence. Kansas City Times. So there you have it. That was the last story I wanted to mention. But again, here we have the mention of, a really tall skeleton, but the brow ridge was really interesting. It says the most peculiar part about the skeleton is the frontal bone. It's very low, differs radically. It is thick, at least an inch across, and an inch wide, extending across the eyes, which it sounds like the description of the skull from Ellis County, which is basically the same general thing. It's got a very thick bone across the skull. So that seems to be like kind of a hot spot in the country for these strange skull descriptions, and I felt like this deserved a video because, I've heard these stories from Ohio, but I did not know that this area, it seems like the Missouri River kind of brought ancient peoples to the edge of the Great Plains over in Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, Iowa. There's another story, it was in my South Dakota video, and it didn't go into great description or detail, but it did say that they found skeletons that did not look like any present human beings. So I just wanted to get this story out there and mentioned something that I had noticed, and I really appreciate you guys following along. If you got this far, thank you so much. I'm probably gonna upload this to my Spotify, and from there, share it from there. But if you're on Spotify, please give me a 5-star rating. If you listen to this another platform, please give me a like, follow, subscribe. If you're not already, it really helps me boost through and get higher ratings. I appreciate all your guys' support, and I just wanted to say thank you. So keep camping and exploring the mysteries of our world.